Hi everyone, my name's Bob. I'm with Climate Action London, and we'll get started in a little bit. So we're just going to wait for a few more people to join. Thanks. Again, welcome to everyone who's joining us. We're going to get started in a minute. While we do wait for others, let us know in the chat what neighborhood you're coming from, or if you're outside of London, what community you're coming from. We'd love to hear that. And if you're part of a community or an environmental group or social justice group or anything similar, drop that in the chat as well. We'd love to amplify your work. Let us know about other groups. If you're joining us from the UK and wonder why somebody from London is speaking with a weird accent, welcome to you as well. Just to let everybody know, we are recording tonight's webinar, and we're going to have that up on the London Environmental Network YouTube page or channel, hopefully tomorrow, but cross our fingers that works out. We do have, a more urgent deadline of this November 17th to submit some of the comments. There are other opportunities, and we'll be going through those that have a more delayed deadline or slightly longer deadline, but we'll detail that. But welcome to everyone. We do have the chat function, so continue to let us know where you're joining us from. And we also have a Q&A function. So as we go through sort of different themes or sections, if there's questions that you want us to follow up on, we'll do that at the very end. We do want to keep it fairly moving forward. We want to get to 20 or 25 minutes where we're actually doing some submitting of comments. And I think that's the most important part, is to get there. And then after that, if we want to do any follow up on the Q&A, we'll do that at the end for people that want to continue to stick around. So thank you. Okay, we're going to get going. Why don't we Sure. Okay, so why don't we get going? We can move to the next slide, Leah, please. There's a few concurrent things happening at the same time. So the government's purposely put a bunch of items on the field of play at the same time. So there is a greenbelt land grab that's happening in the GTA. There's the Hamilton boundary expansion, where they wanted to, and they made a smart decision to limit their urban growth boundary, and they had a plan to smart growth within that boundary. That was ripped away. Those are separate issues outside of Bill 23. They are important and deserve our attention and rejection, but Bill 23 has massive potential impacts province-wide. So we're going to be focusing on Bill 23 tonight. Oh, the other thing, as just before we move on, before we start talking about some of the impacts, is we really want you to make comments in the government website on Bill 23. You don't have to be an expert to make comments. As I realize and I dug in and learned more, it's a very complex issue. So don't feel that you need to be an expert to express your opinion or submit a comment. You know, we're not writing an essay or defending a PhD or anything like that. So your opinions are important and your voice is necessary. So thank you. So let's move on forward. We're going to start with loss of municipal democracy and the impact on the conservation authorities. And we're going to have Sandy Levin, former city councillor and community activist supporter, going to speak about that.
Thank you, Bob. There are a lot of moving parts to this bill, many of which affect municipal democracy and affect conservation authorities. For example, Bill 23 deletes the requirements for a public meeting for a plan of subdivision, which plans of subdivision include lots of moving parts, including impacts on environmental features. And those are normally held before a committee of a city council and then voted on by the full council. So there's no longer a requirement for a public meeting where the public can speak. That's the big deal. The second piece of this bill is that individuals as well as neighborhood associations lose the right to appeal any planning decisions made by a municipal council. Only a municipal council will be able to appeal a decision that frankly would, if in a strong mayor situation like Toronto, Hamilton, and potentially London, would still need 2/3 of municipal council to agree to before it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So this is quite a shutdown of what the province considers NIMBY issues, but frankly, these are important decisions for environmental protection as well. The bill also undermines municipalities that want to use green development standards like bird-friendly treatments to windows. That's specifically, at least for residential buildings. It's unclear at this time if they're going to expand that to commercial and industrial. And finally, the conservation authorities are also going to lose the ability to appeal decisions. And it is also in Bill 23 to prevent them from including conditions on ministerial zoning order approvals. So a lot of the work that conservation authorities have done throughout the province are going to be ripped away. Frankly, I think that has a lot to do with impressions as opposed to actual issues. However, it is a very serious concern for conservation authorities and their umbrella group, Conservation Ontario. Over to Brendan.
Thanks, Andy. Next slide, please. My name is Brendan. I'm here on behalf of Bird Friendly London, and I'm going to be talking about what Bill 23 means for loss of nature and especially wetlands. To start off, I just want to say we have this framing problem where housing is put in competition with conserving green space and wetlands, and that narrative is extremely problematic. We have sufficient land that can be developed without harming things like the greenbelt, wetlands, and to argue that we need to destroy remaining green spaces like wetlands to make room for housing, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with wetlands, because wetlands are extremely rare in Southern Ontario. We've lost a shocking and unacceptable amount of wetlands, and that has critical implications for the functions of those wetlands and keeping us safe and absorbing stormwater, especially under climate change conditions. So an important thing about what's being proposed is we're talking about how we protect wetlands in terms of how we classify those wetlands. So right now we have what's called wetland complexing, or what that means is you can have kind of smaller pieces of wetland areas that are maybe separated by a road or something in between, but are still functionally grouped together within a common wetland boundary. And we call that a wetland complex. Those are super common in London. And as a complex, those smaller patches meet the criteria to be classified as provincially significant under the current evaluation system. Bill 23 includes proposed changes to that evaluation system. So specifically, we're removing wetland complexing altogether. The idea is for remaining wetlands in Ontario to be reevaluated under the new system, but without complexing. And that's actually pretty bad news for the wetlands, because it means that individual units, like the smaller components of a complex, have to individually qualify as significant. They're no longer part of a complex. And so you can imagine a lot of the smaller parts of those complexes are not going to meet the criterion to be classified as provincially significant. And that's going to make them easier to be developed and for development to be approved right next to those wetlands without protective measures. Another thing that's unclear is who is going to be kind of overseeing how the wetlands are evaluated and determining if they're significant or not, or if the criteria are actually being met. Bill 23, so right now, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the provincial government, oversees the wetland evaluation system, but in Bill 23, they're proposing that the classification of being provincially significant no longer depends on the evaluation. It's sort of just up to like the professional opinion of a wetland evaluator who is submitting an evaluation or a reevaluation or a mapping update to a decision maker like planning authority or a municipality, but there's not much oversight from MNRF. And so we lose the credibility of the evaluation tool, the system, if there's no oversight. To give you a sense of what this might look like in London, so the Upper Thames watershed has about 4.6% wetland cover right now, and only about 1.6% of that is considered provincially significant under the current evaluation system. But with the proposed changes, that's going to drop to about 1.3. And that equates to an approximate reduction of 20% of London's wetlands being considered provincially significant. So for example, like the Sifton Bog and Dingman Creek Fen Wetland Complex would both lose their provincially significant wetland status with the proposed changes. And those habitats like bogs and fen are extremely rare in our region. There's other stuff being removed from the wetland tool, like evaluating reproductive habitat and migration, or feeding or hibernation habitat for endangered and threatened species. Scoring for that has been removed. Not really sure where that went. And it's also not clear like what they're going to do with all this data from the evaluation system. So historically, that was MNRF's responsibility, but now it's not really clear who is going to be managing all of that information and providing it to stakeholders moving forward. Conservation authorities have traditionally kept inventories of wetland data for many years, and they would be really good for that. And conservation authorities are especially critical for smaller municipalities that don't have the same resources we do in like the City of London to have an internal staff ecologist. So conservation authority consultations are extremely important for those smaller municipalities. I'll say another piece about offsetting. It's now being proposed that basically you can pay into a fund, and that would allow you to destroy a wetland for development, so long as another wetland is created somewhere else. And it's not really clear how compatible the new somewhere else wetland is with the existing wetland. It's just sort of wishy-washy and bad news. And as many of you will appreciate, you can't just move a wetland that took thousands of years to be created. Yeah, so, there's a number of complex moving parts in here. I would say it bears worth thinking about what this is going to cost in terms of damages and risk mitigation under climate change. Wetlands serve those really critical functions with stormwater. And if we lose wetlands, it's going to be very expensive to repair our infrastructure, to deal with flooded basements. And that is a cost that will be burdened onto taxpayers. That's it for my section.
Thanks, Brendan. We're going to move back to Sandy for the next section.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the arguments behind Bill 23 is that this is going to create more affordable housing. And it may actually create less affordable housing. One of the things is new housing, particularly municipalities like London, Hamilton, et cetera, require sewers. And municipalities need the money to build those sewers. And those sewers come from development charges. And there are a number of changes to the funding of development charges that it's being proposed. They're also suggesting that telling municipalities they have to spend 60% of their reserves in development funds. Well, frankly, if every municipality is looking to build sewers, roads, et cetera, to deal with growth, then price for those contractors is going to go up because the demand for their services is going to go up. Secondly, new housing takes time to build. Everybody knows that. You can't just magically create a house. It takes time. It has to be built. New housing is also priced to cover costs and profits. There's no guarantee that prices are going to come down with more supply. Frankly, if demand falls, builders build less. Nobody in their right mind is going to build an apartment or a house and leave it empty. And for renters, this is a big deal. It's going to remove and weaken some tools that cities use. Now, it's primarily focused on the GTA, but it limits future tools that could be used in London. For example, there's a rental replacement requirement. It's going to delete those protections. Renters where a property is demolished or converted have a right to be housed again, pretty much at the same price as well. Well, province is throwing that one out too. So there's many things that don't fit really to reality in some parts of Bill 23. Next slide.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. I'm going to deal with this one. So as you can see, some of the impacts that Sandy and Brendan have gone through really paints a picture where we've got loss of wetlands, loss of control by the municipal or regional governments to enact their own plans, right? You know, in the absence of climate and environmental leadership from the Ontario government, the municipalities, regional governments, and cities have been taking on the burden of diverting new homes away from farmland and natural spaces, trying to slash the carbon emissions and ending car dependency, right? So now with Bill 23, it really is stepping in and actively stopping cities from taking these measures, right? Before it was just a lack of leadership. Now it's actively stomping in and preventing those things happening. So we definitely need to reflect on how Bill 23 negatively impacts London's ability to move forward, right? So it's the Climate Emergency Action Plan, which envisions somewhat to the inward and upward growth as envisioned by the London Plan, as well. Green development standards, or just standards in generally for design standards, right? So can the city find a way around that and enact new policies to get around Bill 23, or are they really just stuck? And what we're going to end up with is more sprawl that is really only built for the few, right? So, and that's the London impact. As both Sandy and Brendan alluded to, the smaller communities around that don't have a strong planning department are even at a worse case, right? So we really need to think about rejecting Bill 23 and really fighting for the things that we believe in. So I think I'll leave it there. I could just go on about all the impacts on the climate, but that'll end up in a sort of an epic rant. So why don't we move? It's almost 20 after, so why don't we move to submitting comments, and then we'll come back and address anybody that's got further questions. So I'm going to share my screen. And so a lot of what we found a lot of times is when people are given the opportunity to submit some comments, either they don't feel like they're an expert, and we want to dissuade that myth, and also they're not sure what to actually write. So what we've come up with, and it's been shared in the links, is some documents of by themes, right? What inspires you to make comments? So is it, you know, less affordable housing? Is it the loss of wetlands and farmland, natural areas? So we put in some suggestive comments that you could submit. You know, is it the loss of municipal democracy and the loss of cities and regional governments to chart their own course of how to grow? Or is it the climate impacts? Now you can, if you're inspired for everything, you can just go ahead and present everything. But here's an opportunity where, you know, I could, as a first step, I could say, I'm really concerned about the climate impact. So I'm going to go into this document and copy and paste. I'm going to copy it because I really like this, and then perhaps this is what inspires me. And then I'm going to move to, hang on, I have to stop sharing for a second. And this is the government website where you can actually submit the comment. So if you want to follow along, definitely do that. We want people to submit comments, or you could do it right after, or as we get into the Q&A. We definitely want people to submit. This is the gist of it. So when you get onto the website, and the link has been already provided in the chat, you're going to choose a topic. So do you know the title? And we're going to say, yes, we do. And we're going to select Bill 23 from the drop-down list that appears after we select that. And then we're going to move to the next page. And there's a delay. I'm going and ask you which application you would like to submit. I'm just going to submit material only. And it just asked me to confirm that here's the deadline, November 17th at 7 p.m. Next page. Then it's going to ask me a question of whether I'm submitting as an individual or an employer member. So I'm an individual. And as soon as I select that, it's going to ask me for some basic name, like my name and contact information. So I'm going to fill that in with my email address. And then down below, if I've created my own comments and made a document out of it, whether it be a PDF or a doc or whatever, I can actually attach that. But I already have it in my, I've copied something into my clipboard, so I'm just going to paste it into here. And then I could edit it from here, right? So I could say, I'm not really keen about this particular paragraph. And then I'm going to delete that. And I could change some other wording that if I wanted to, right? So again, we're not trying to, you know, create a Giller Prize-winning novel here, but we want to express our opinion that we need to revoke Bill 23. All right, so then if I review everything that's in here and I'm happy with it, all I have to do is hit submit. And yep, hopefully submitted. Well, it must have. I just got a confirmation email back. So, and then that's all there is to it. And you get a confirmation email back. It's really simple. Definitely do it tonight. Get your friends to do it. Talk to them about how important Bill 23 is. I'll stop sharing and we'll just go back to the slide deck. So we just walked through the Legislative Assembly comments and how you can submit them. Super easy, right? Deadline is tomorrow, and we want them to be submitted. There are other opportunities to submit comments that are listed below. So Regional Registry of Ontario, and there's different deadlines. So each of those have, you're commenting about different things. So perhaps you're really upset that there's going to be basically an offsetting and developers can just sort of pay to destroy wetlands. And it just becomes a cost of doing business. Well, go to that one, add in your comments, right? So whatever inspires you, we would love to have you do all of them. And those, we'll send out the links in a follow-up email, but they also should be in the chat as well. Those are important as well. We move to the next slide. So here's some other steps. So you call your MPP. So in London, they're all, the MPPs are not in the government, or they're in the government. They're not conservative MPs, so they're in the opposition. But I've already communicated with my local MPP, and they are he's concerned about it, and you can start that dialogue with them. Get them to fight hard for us. You can sign an environmental defense petition. That actually sends a letter based on your address, will automatically send a letter to your local MPP. And you can start that communication with them through that as well. Okay, tell a friend how important it is for Bill 23, right? Get them to submit. If you don't have time tonight, your weekend assignment is going to go to that environmental registry and start putting in some comments. Acorn London, who is in London and fights for renters' rights, is having an event outside of City Hall on Friday at 4 p.m. So if you want to join them, that would be awesome as well. And as well, support your local city councilors, the ones that support, you know, smart inward and upward growth, that are looking to protect nature and climate action. You know, it's a new council in London, or even in whatever municipality that you're in. Those elected officials that are, you know, the climate champions, or, you know, the champions for smart growth, financial sustainability, send them a positive note. Let them know that you support them, and you are really happy that they've stepped forward to speak for the community. There are also, you'll notice in the various social media, there's a lot of different events going on across Ontario in the next while. A lot of them are intermixing Bill 23 and saving the Greenbelt. That's fine. Support those, like them. If one of them is near you, go and support them as well, but definitely get your comments in. Okay, so we can move to the next slide, I think. Oh, right. So we're at a Q&A. I don't know if anybody's submitted Q&As or if there's anything that you would like us to follow up on or expand upon. Let us know. As well as if you've got other events that are happening, to let us know, and we'll definitely try to share all of those around. Okay, we went really. Brendan or Sandy, do you have any other sort of follow-up comments maybe I didn't touch on and you would like to just emphasize?
I can add a couple of comments. So this all seems very hopeless. It's very disheartening, but there is precedent for this government pulling back extreme proposals in response to public outcry. They want to be liked, and when a lot of people speak up, I think they do pay attention to the volume of comments they receive. Not sure to what extent they go through and read the fine details of everything, but the number of comments that they receive about these things, I believe, is important to them. The other thing is, in talking about this with people, a lot of folks don't have the same background understanding, and we also come at this with different values of what's important to us. I talked earlier about how the housing issue has kind of been pitted against the environmental issue as though they're opposed. I think we need to find common ground and speak with language that appeals to a variety of values, talking about what the cost will be to taxpayers, especially emphasizing that a lot of this is really unnecessary. I think we'll maybe get through to people who are not otherwise sympathetic to nature as many of us are.
Great, thanks, Brandon. Sandy, do you have any closing comments or things that we might have missed out on?
No, I think it's been covered. It now requires action. So it really depends on people moving forward. And I'd like to suggest making as many calls as you can to members of the provincial parliament, and even if it's members of the government, because it's really hard for people to make phone calls. It's easy to press buttons and fill out a petition that's already out there. If we can jam their lines with a lot of phone calls, then they know people are paying attention to this and people are concerned. So I encourage you to reach out and call. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I would encourage people to do that as well. You don't need to be an expert on all aspects of Bill 23 to give them a call and express your concern over aspects of Bill 23, right? So thank you for that, and I think we'll just wrap it up there. Thanks for everyone.